I rather arbitrarily restricted this podcast to American pacifists, partly just because I was overwhelmed by the prospect of trying to do the whole world. But now I want to talk about how we get. I want to do a transition from the 19th to 20th centuries, a transition from people like Ballou to people like Martin Luther King. And as I noted in the Lucretia Mott episode, I don't think the late 19th century, in the US in particular, was a golden period of pacifism. And maybe it kind of retrenched from being a social movement or even a general movement among different varieties of Christians in the US to retreating into the peace churches, like Quakerism, Mennonites, Dunkards. I don't know. I guess I need to do more research to really show that. But I do think the Civil War in the U.S. would lead up to it, and then the war itself. These were crises in American pacifism because all the pacifists were abolitionists. So I want to talk about 3 transmissions that brought pacifism from people like Garrison and Ballou to people like King and Bayard Rustin and Thomas Merton and Dorothy Day in the 20th century. And I guess I feel like I realized something historically as I've been reading, the literature of pacifism. All right, so, so how do we get from Ballou, Christian non-resistance, to the King movement? And the story, I've indicated it several times, but the story is fairly straightforward, although maybe it's also going to be presented somewhat simplified. So too straightforward, perhaps. I want to think of it in terms of 3 transmissions, each of which is extremely contingent and almost looks destined or something. I hesitate to say things like that. But okay, so we've seen this. I talked about this with Ballou, and I keep coming back to Tolstoy. Tolstoy is a central figure in the transmission of pacifism, nonviolence, and nonviolent resistance between people like Ballou in the 1840s, let's say, and people like Rustin and King in the 50s and 60s. Tolstoy is the key figure. So, all right, the 3 transmissions. Ballou and Garrison to Tolstoy. Tolstoy to Mohandas Gandhi. Gandhi to King. Each of them had other sources as well, but these are demonstrably central in each case of transmission. And, created these amazing nonviolent resistance movements in India and in the U.S. I'm not denying that there could be various criticisms of these movements, but I'm still taking great inspiration from them. And they were even effective. England not being part of the British Empire any longer. Civil rights in the U.S., more of a mixed bag in a way, and with a less definite endpoint, I suppose, and still is a struggle. Now, okay, so let's take the first of these transmissions, Ballou to Tolstoy. And, this book, which is completely central to Gandhi, The Kingdom of God is Within You by Leo Tolstoy, it starts by trying to make a history for pacifism. And the longest treatment is about Aden Ballou. And like I say, he quotes all of Garrison's Declaration of Sentiments of the New England Peace Society. And then he quotes the Catechism of Non-Resistance by Ballou. And he says things like this. He says about Ballou that his works are distinguished by their clearness of thought and eloquence of exposition. One would have thought that Ballou's work would have been well known. Like Tolstoy receives this as confirmation. By the way, I'm in my wife Jane Irish's art studio. These are works by her in process behind me. It's great to live in a place from which art emerges. One would have thought that Ballou's work would have been well known, and the ideas expressed by him would have been either accepted or refuted, but such has not been the case. The work of Garrison, the father, in his foundation of the Society of Non-Resistance and his declaration, even more than my correspondence with the Quakers, convinced me of the fact that the departure of the ruling form of Christianity from the law of Christ on non-resistance by force is an error that has long been observed and pointed out, and that men have labored and are still laboring to correct. The works of Garrison convinced me of non-resistance, he says right there. Ballou's work confirmed me. He read Garrison first, and Garrison was early. Ballou's work confirmed me still more in this view, but the fate of Garrison, still more that of Ballou, in being completely unrecognized in spite of 50 years of obstinate and persistent work in the same direction, confirmed me in the idea that there exists a kind of tacit but steadfast conspiracy of silence about all such efforts. Like all Christians are kind of dedicated to repressing this. Precisely as it was with all the preaching of the Quakers for 200 years, and too, with the efforts of Garrison, the foundation of his society and journal and his declaration, so it is with the life work of Ballou. It seems just as though it did not exist and had never existed. Like the position of Tolstoy here is, someone found the truth. A whole bunch of people found the truth together. And then it was repressed. And now you can't even find it. When Tolstoy started to go in this direction, he needed to assemble extremely obscure texts from everywhere to even show that there was a history of pacifism. But okay, so right there, and as the book makes clear, The Kingdom of God is Within You by Tolstoy, the fundamental influences here articulating his whole direction, and his positions are identical, are Garrison and Ballou and American Peace and Lucretia Mott and American Quakers and British Quakers, but all the bunch of the people that we've seen. And now he says it's all dead, like it's all disappeared. But he found it and he revived it, okay? And this is why it starts to feel like prophecy, like destiny a little bit. Right? Like he's saying, no one knows these people at all, but people started to know these people after his revival, after his rediscovery. Tolstoy's. All right, now, Tolstoy's Kingdom of God is Within You is completely central to Gandhi. All right, so Gandhi as a young man, I'm no expert on Gandhi, but I've been, trying to remind myself of some facts of Gandhi's life. As a young man, Gandhi, like many people from the Indian subcontinent, was working in South Africa. And, all right, so what happened here is that an editor in India, Tarak Nath Das, who edited a newspaper called Free Hindustan, which was dedicated to Indian independence, wrote to Tolstoy. Tolstoy was a world-famous This was after all his famous novels, okay, in the 80s and 90s. And actually now we're in the 1900s, the 1900s. A beloved figure thought of by much of the world as a kind of sage. And he tried to occupy that position, Tolstoy did. Tarak Nath Das, a Indian editor, writes to Tolstoy saying, what do you think about British independence? Do you support us? Like, we'd love to write a quote from you just saying, like, yes, India must be free or something like that, all right? So then Tolstoy wrote, this is, years after The Kingdom of God is Within You, Tolstoy wrote a text, very short book or a pamphlet-sized text called Letter to a Hindu. And that was, the Hindu referred to was Das, the editor. Now, one thing that he does in Letter to a Hindu, published in Hindustan, Free Hindustan, is he portrays it just as Ballou did, as Garrison did, as a Christian demand. Nonviolence is a Christian matter, okay? And we quote the Sermon on the Mount incessantly to that effect. As soon as he starts to communicate outside the Christian faith, Tolstoy realizes he needs something else, okay? Like, it's not going to be that convincing to quote Bible passages at the Hindus, okay? And so what he does is he starts to assemble quotations from the Bhagavad Gita. This is how he starts his letter. Don't search out peace and quiet in the areas of the earth which breed delusions and desires in people, because if you do, you'll be dragged through the mud and muck of life, which is far away from me. Krishna speaking in the Bhagavad Gita, the chapter of the Mahabharata. And I mean, it is a little surprising to use the Bhagavad Gita, and Gandhi does too, under Tolstoy's influence, partly, because the Bhagavad Gita does seem to recommend fighting war. But there's a lot of kind of messages of peace and love that could be read as moving in a pacifist direction. And quite surprisingly, I mean, this is a surprising development, Tolstoy quotes a text that he calls the Hindu Chorale, K-U-R-A-L. This is the Chorale, a ancient set of Tamil language texts, okay? Giving like philosophy, a kind of philosophy of Hinduism, and widely respected texts. I don't know how Tolstoy found these passages or saw them translated into Russian or however he was reading these, but he quotes to this effect: the mission of a sinless person, this is from the Hindu Chorale, consists of acting and living without causing pain or sorrow to others. Now, we could really connect this very much to other subcontinental religious traditions, Buddhism and Jainism especially, who are even more extreme on this. And I'm a little surprised he didn't go in that direction. Like, Letter to a Buddhist would be the most natural thing you ever saw, and got to be later on with Thich Nhat Hanh and many others. Who is a good person? Asked the Hindu Chorale. That's what Tolstoy calls it. The person who doesn't do evil to the person who's just done them evil. That person is a good person. And this is probably written with no awareness of the Christian text. If someone creates suffering in the people who hate them for no reason, they will eventually be overtaken by pain and grief that will never stop. So here we're kind of appealing to the idea of karma, And that's a good way to start to argue for nonviolence too. If you believe in karma, then doing violence will bring violence upon you. If you live by the sword, you'll die by the sword. How do you punish an evil person doing wrong to you? Make them guilty and ashamed of themselves by doing them an act of love, kindness, or blessing. What's the use of being absurdly, outrageously smart and bursting with knowledge and wisdom if, when you hear this, you don't just help yourself, but simultaneously help others in their suffering as much as you can help yourself? If in the morning someone decides to do wrong to someone, to do evil and hurt another person, by nighttime the evil will come right back to them and destroy them. All right, I guess what I've been reading indicates that when Gandhi, first of all, the fundamental influence he says on his development of nonviolence is Tolstoy's book, The Kingdom of God is Within You. And then he says, Gandhi says, indicates that he was not familiar with these Hindu texts, very much putting forward like the values of nonviolence and non-resistance, until Tolstoy quoted them, which is just a shocking thing. But also Tolstoy's research on nonviolence the world over was remarkably thorough. And he really had a lot of resources to do it. Like he put out a call, like send me your texts of nonviolence. I'm trying to figure out the history of nonviolence here. And he was a world famous person, and people did, including Ballou and Garrison's son and everything. All right, but Gandhi too. So Gandhi read Tolstoy's letter to a Hindu in an Indian newspaper while he was in South Africa. Gandhi was in South Africa and was blown away by it, okay? And that is the fundamental origin of Gandhi's nonviolence, I think. And then Tolstoy even started to extend it beyond the Christian context, and in a way that Gandhi found extremely useful, right, and profound. Gandhi made a translation of Tolstoy's letter to a Hindu into Gujarati and published it in his own newspaper in South Africa. And Gandhi says things like this about Tolstoy. To me, as a humble follower of that great teacher, Leo Tolstoy, whom I have looked upon as one of my guides, it is a matter of honor to be connected with the publication of Tolstoy's letter, especially it being the one which is now given to the world. Tolstoy's life has been devoted to replacing the method of violence for removing tyranny or securing the method of non-resistance to evil. This is early Gandhi. This is 1909. He would meet hatred expressed in violence by love expressed in self-suffering. He admits no exception to whittle down this great and divine law of love. He applies it to all the problems that trouble mankind. This is Gandhi's ethic, and he got it by being deeply inspired by Tolstoy's Kingdom of God is Within You. When a man like Tolstoy, one of the clearest thinkers in the Western world, one of the greatest writers, one who as a soldier has known what violence is and what it can do, I should review Tolstoy's military record, condemns Japan for having blindly followed the law of modern science, falsely so called, and fears for the country the greatest calamities, it is for us to pause and consider whether in our impatience of English rule, we do not want to replace one evil by another and worse one. Like if we're going to be independent, we're going to need to do it peacefully. And he refers to him as the sage of Yasnaya Polyana, his farm in Russia, Tolstoy's. All right. Now, okay, so, I mean, I can't do justice to the Gandhian revolution in India and the achievement of independence in India. It's a long story, and, that's just the initial impulse, right? And it takes to really create the nonviolent techniques of resistance that lead to a mass movement that achieves independence of 200, 300 million people, okay? That's a long story, and Gandhi developed many ideas and stuff like this that are not in Tolstoy, or that, because Tolstoy is not leading a mass movement right now for independence or something like that. He's exploring the spiritual dimensions of nonviolence, which Gandhi is doing too. Now, the influence of the Gandhi movement on the King movement is immense. And I mean, this is widely known and acknowledged. That's not, again, the only source of Martin Luther King's nonviolence, or Bayard Rustin and others who were involved. Lawton. But it's absolutely central. And so I just wanted to document that briefly. But maybe I didn't bring my the right books to do that. Okay, but so let me just say, well, no, how about this? This is something that King says after he visits India in 1959. That's well after Gandhi's death. Gandhi's been dead for a decade. And King never met Gandhi. He was quite young when Gandhi died. Although it would have been, strictly speaking, possible, I suppose. They would both been adults briefly, simultaneously. So King writes this in Ebony magazine after he returns to India, where he was deeply moved and studying nonviolence and the nonviolent movement very carefully. He says, while the Montgomery boycott was going on, and this is before he goes to India, India's Gandhi was the guiding light of our technique of nonviolent social change. We spoke of him often. So as soon as our victory over bus segregation was won, some of my friends said, why don't you go to India and see for yourself what the Mahatma, whom you so admire, has wrought. So I just want to emphasize the centrality of Gandhi's nonviolence to the King movement, okay? And then I just want to say, this is a remarkable set of transmissions which keeps an ethics and politics of nonviolence alive for a century and leads to some of the most inspiring movements of the 20th century. And if Garrison and Ballou, they actually thought they were speaking prophetically, and that this was destined to be something. But if they had lived into the Ballou did, I worry that they would have despaired. And I think lots of Americans did despair. Lots of people all over the world who had been followers of nonviolence, and Quakers and so on, despaired. Okay? But meanwhile, almost indetectably, these texts and these ideas continued this profound influence that transformed the 20th century. And these ideas, I think, of course, probably mean the difference between us surviving and being extinguished in the long run. Good job, Garrison and Ballou, to keep working, even if you didn't know, or maybe you believed, that this could have these kinds of outcomes. And we don't know what the outcome, the overall outcome can be in another 100 years. And I'm not saying that this is destined to continue or something like this. Perhaps we're destined for something a lot darker than that. But what I'm saying is, it wouldn't be insane to draw hope from the transmission of nonviolence, to Russia, then to South Africa, then to India, then back to the US, and around the world. All right, there's an episode, and I think next. Okay, what do we do next? I guess I was thinking Dorothy Day, but it might be Jane Addams. I'm gonna do some more research on Jane Addams' pacifism and talk about early 20th century American pacifism.